Ready? I'd like to welcome everyone to the Monday, July 11th meeting of the Pine Bluffs Town Council. Will everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
The first item is the public hearing for ordinance 2022-07, zoning change for 208 and 100 Butler, which reads, an ordinance amending the town of Pine Bluffs zoning map by changing certain specified property from Zone B residential to Zone C commercial, providing for an effective date. Is there any comment? Is there any comment? Is there any comment? Hearing none, moving on to the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Moving on to new business. I will be recusing myself from items 6 and 7 because of a conflict, and Bubba will be doing that.
I also abstain from items 5 and 6.
Did I say 5 and 6 or 6?
You said 6.
6 and 7.
5 and 6.
Okay then, new business, ordinance 2022-07. This is the third reading. An ordinance amending the town of Pine Bluffs zoning map by changing certain specified properties from Zone B residential to Zone C commercial, for providing for an effective date. Any discussion? Okay, calls for roll call on the third. Yes, sir.
We would need a motion and a second
Yep.
to approve on third.
I'll make a motion to approve it. Ordinance number 2022-07.
It's been moved and seconded. Takes a roll call vote. Jana?
Aye.
Myself is aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Now the building permit for 208 Butler. It's a shop. Any discussion? Okay.
I know.
Approve it?
Yeah.
Okay. I move to approve the building permit for 208 Butler.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Pass. Back to you, Senior.
All right. The next item on our agenda is visitor comments, and first on that is the community master plan, and Miriam is here.
Hi, I do have a presentation.
Okay.
Anyone in the audience wants to see it, I can go through it. I think you have it on your tablets.
Sure. I don't know that are we set up to do that, or?
I don't know. Are we set up to do that?
Not at the moment.
Um,
Could be.
Are there other visitor comments here while we're working out our stuff?
I'm just here for the solar panels at my house, for me to come.
Okay. Did you apply for the permit?
Yeah, months ago.
Is that the one from Beach Street?
We approved our new solar ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
Kim, are you familiar with that?
I don't. Could you repeat it? I couldn't hear you.
This gentleman and your name, please.
Judd Dawson.
Judd.
260 10th Street.
To what?
260 10th Street.
That's not the one I was thinking it was.
I have not seen him. Gentleman is here about his solar permit. Did we have a solar permit we were waiting on to pass the ordinance? Other than
Yes,
the
we
one
were.
on, not the one on Beach. The one on
East 10th.
926 East 10th. I don't believe I've seen that permit.
I have not seen one for East 10th. The only one I've seen is the one for Beach. When did it get submitted?
He said months ago.
Was that for the house? The house, the
No,
house
that's
was
not-
there, but he's looking for solar, right?
Yeah, solar at my house.
We never saw anything on that. I don't remember seeing anything.
It literally never came on our agenda that we,
Okay.
where's 926 is?
Right next to
Okay.
Wheeler.
Sure. Well, I apologize for that. I don't know.
I can look into it tomorrow with Renee and Jerica and see where it's at.
So
Yeah.
we'd be happy to try to expedite it if it's something that we have
That
obviously.
would be awesome, because it's been since February.
So we just at the last meeting, I believe, passed our solar ordinance.
Okay.
And so, yeah, we'd be happy to review that as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to hold you up. We're just,
Yeah.
I'm unfamiliar, so.
I consider y'all my neighbors. I was like, what do they do?
Well,
More sense.
you're the first guy to ever wonder what we're doing.
I bet I'm not.
Carrie does it every
Sorry.
week.
You're probably
Thanks for the
right,
tires.
yeah. Sorry about that.
Well,
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Well,
All
we
right,
couldn't figure out the technology, but you should have the packets on your tablets. Basically, I'm here to just give you an update on where we are with the community master plan process. And it's an exciting time because we actually have a draft for you. And I don't know if you've had a chance to read through it, but what I was hoping to do with you tonight is to just kind of walk through the process, the structure, some of the major components of it, and just have an informal conversation about what you think we still need to improve on, and then we can talk about next steps about how to get this down the finish line later this fall. So, a 3-phase process. We have successfully run through the first 2 phases, and we are now in phase 3, plan development. And we are right on schedule. So that puts us with July here. We were doing the first few tasks of phase 3, which is goal policy and strategy development. We have our steering committee meetings. We had one in June, and we'll have one in July. And then a plan draft and public review. So we have this working draft that you have in front of you as well. Ultimately, we are going to hopefully revise it and refine it based on your comment and input, and bring it back out to the public for their review in August. And then we will, if all goes smoothly, we will take public comment in consideration and review the draft, and it can then go through formal adoption in September and October. So the plan structure has five chapters, and I apologize for my misnumbering on page 4 of my slide deck. Chapter 1 is an introduction of, what is a community master plan, the importance of it, and the legal basis. Chapter 2 is context and trends, which is about existing conditions, kind of what we have in place, what the data is showing. Chapter 3 is policy framework, which will really be one of the chapters that we'll refer to at most moving forward. It's where the vision, the goals, and policies are located. And so ultimately, that's a chapter where you can really look for the direction necessary for future budgeting decisions, future programming. Even you can use that chapter for development review and that kind of thing. Chapter 4, is the future land use plan, which is the physical embodiment of those goals and policies. So we have mapped the city with kind of an ideal future land use category. So a handful of categories that showcase, kind of more stable neighborhoods, low-density neighborhoods, rural agricultural areas that are likely not to change, downtown as its own district, those kind of things. And so that is one thing I'd really love to get your feedback on tonight, is looking at that map and those categories closely. And then Chapter 5, implementation. And that is where we have outlined a handful of priority implementation strategies. And so this is kind of where we can look back to of what is our 5-year implementation strategy. What are the things that we need to start working toward that are more long-term goals that might take a little bit longer, but are worth getting a head start on now. Any questions on process or how this document has been structured before I kind of dig into the meat? Okay. So we have a draft vision, which was workshopped with the public at our last public event. That stated, Pine Bluffs is a welcoming community where families live and grow, businesses thrive, and opportunity is knocking at your door. This is still a draft vision until it goes to adoption. So if there is still any issues with how that's phrased, or if we'd like to do any nuances, there's still opportunity to revise that statement. And then as we get into slides 6 through 9, this is where we've outlined some of the goals. And in the actual document, each of these goal statements is accompanied by policies or kind of actionable plan items. And I don't know if I need to go through each one of these line by line, but I wanted to make sure that we can at least have the framework that we're organizing them by land use, economic development, housing, recreation and natural resources, community character and services, transportation, and utility and infrastructure. And so there should be a place for everything. And if there is something missing, we want to make sure that we're catching it early.
I tried to peruse several month ago or whatever the raw data from these. Mm-hmm. One thing that got me when I was looking at these little bubble things or whatever you call them, but on the top of the recreation one, do not make Pine Bluffs a destination.
Are you looking at the public feedback?
Yeah. And I know we had an opportunity to discuss that, but I don't remember pulling that out of there. And did you have discussion about what that means?
I think there was a fear that we don't want to make it, we don't want to overrun the community in so much that we'll lose its character. But I can see how that statement would, because I've also heard the opposite of that. We do want to attract some level of tourism. We wanted to make it a destination, rural destination for folks that are coming into town for work or business.
Yeah, I thought it was an odd kind of thing.
Yeah. You know, I'm gonna make a note of that, Mayor, and I'll make sure that the data actually aligns with that, what that graphic states.
Okay.
Did anything else pop out at you from the feedback that we got from the public in that introduction chapter?
Seems like some of them were like a dream list they had, you know?
Yeah.
Some of it is almost impossible to do, what they're looking for.
That was kind of the point, was like, what could happen in 20
Well, you know,
years?
the last time they did a survey like that, they wanted a Walmart down here, you know? And,
Well,
you know, that ain't gonna happen, you know, but.
I think it is important to keep in mind that these are not short-term objectives. These are goals, they're ideas.
Yeah. I mean, this really is supposed to be an aspirational guiding document, a roadmap to where we could be in the future. So a lot of these are kind of long-term goals that are not going to be easy to reach.
Well, with that, I like the recreation ones, I think, have a lot of good things that are, some of which are. With that, the recreation. We're able to accomplish, or we could accomplish. Things that are, some of which are. With that, the recreation. We're able to. Things that are. That's bizarre. It's like on a loop too. That's great.
Kim, do you have your mic on? Okay. I think it's when she has her mic on it.
Oh,
And she's not speaking.
well, great.
Yeah, I think those.
But I think there are things in here that are, like, certainly go from the fairly reasonable, short-term things to some fairly lofty things. That's good.
Some of
Healthy
them
mix.
were things I would never even think about, so that was fun to hear from everyone else.
But supported?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So on slide 10, I've got some questions. I wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to tell me if there was anything missing or needs to be revised about this selection of goals and policies. If overall the direction is supported by the council, and if the concepts are clear. One of my questions later is, there's an opportunity in this process to have some additional supporting graphics in the document. And so if there were any concepts that would benefit from a supporting graphic or an illustration or a diagram, we have budget in our process to do that. So if there were anything that stood out that was maybe a new concept or would benefit from an illustration or as I said, some sort of supporting graphic, let me know.
Can you also, like, maybe I'm overthinking this, but small indoor recreation, can you help me with, like, an example of that during your meetings? I'm just, that's one of those things that seems like something we could accomplish, but I don't know, because I don't really know what they're getting at.
Right, so year-round indoor recreation space was often brought up. And that can be an indoor pool, it could be another, basketball court, it could be a community center that has more of a flexible space. I don't know if there was a list of what that space needed to look like, but there was, especially from high school students, I think, something that they could do that was kind of out of the cold in the winter.
Sure. Okay.
So then on slide 11, we have this draft future land use map. And, and that's on page, if you're looking at the document, that's gonna be later in the, page 33 of the draft doc. So this is a new tool for the community, as this is the first community master plan that Pine Bluffs has had. We've never had a future land use plan before. We've only ever had zoning. And so this is a tool that enables kind of a future-looking guide that this group can use for development review proposals or zoning changes that come down the line in front of your desk. And so this is kind of looking at, our timeline, our planning horizon is about 20 years. So how this community could grow or develop or retain, neighborhoods or rural areas or open space into that 20 years. So we've broken it down by, let's see, 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different future land use categories here that we've workshopped with the steering committee. The public has not seen this yet, but we feel that this is a good starting place, at least, to bring to the community, to bring to the public, to kind of characterize different neighborhoods and how they might develop. The pages prefacing that map, starting on page 29, have a description of what those categories are intended to achieve, the character and the level of the mix of land uses, the level of residential density, or the form of the commercial areas. And I know that some folks might not be familiar with what a floor area ratio is or how we do density, so I'm happy to answer any questions about what that suggested commercial FAR or density ranges mean conceptually. Is there any questions on that?
Yeah, sure. Why don't you go ahead and explain what it means?
Okay. So
Yeah, that question.
it's a ratio of the building on its lot. So if you have, let's say, a 10,000 square foot parcel, the FAR is the ratio of how much of that parcel has a building on it. So a 1 FAR is that the whole parcel of land, the building covers the whole parcel of land with a single-story building. 1 can also mean that the building covers half of that parcel of land with a 2-story building, and so forth. So you could do a quarter of it with a 4-story building, right? And so anything, that's kind of gives a sense of how much of that building, or how much square footage of retail space or commercial space you would get with that FAR. So it's the equivalent of how we range residential density for commercial space.
So I think it's in there. So are you going to talk about employment here, or do you want me to just ask?
Go for it, yeah.
So as you're using it, I was interested in the employment rate. So how is that calculated?
The employment rate in the existing, in the context and...
Yeah, it says our employment rate has increased over the last 5 years from 46 to 60.
Right. So this is based on the data that we have available to us now, which is usually census or the American Community Survey. So it's not exact numbers, and it is still an estimate, even with the census. Let me find the...
So I guess if
you're
you could
looking at.
further explain, like it's every able person over
Yeah,
so
the
many years
census,
of age? What?
they define the labor force, I think, from age 17 to 65. But now that I say that out loud, I am doubting that number. So I know it's starting at age, I think, 17. It might not actually have like a retirement date. But if you're curious about the details of that statistic, I can get back to you.
Do you think it's important? One of the questions I had was, I was still struck by the median income versus median home price. And like, how important is that for us to like highlight in the document? On one hand, I think it really shows our need to take care of probably both things, but employment, but certainly reasonable housing costs, and to try to drive that down in some way with more inventory or more rental or more whatever. But like, is that a negative feature that you don't really include in a plan that's looking forward, or does it reaffirm that that's a really important thing to work on?
I think it just reaffirms that it's a challenge for this community, and the importance of being able to set a trajectory to right that ship, right? So every community has its challenges, and I think the importance of having these community master plans is to be able to say, these are our challenges and this is what we're going to do moving forward to help it. But you're right about it's not a one-size-fits-all solution either for this community. Sure. Housing is going to be impacted by housing stock, housing, the diversity of housing options, and then, of course, the affordability of them.
I thought the commute time stuff was interesting. I just never saw that in the data, but.
And the directional,
Yeah.
Some of the data can be a little bit obtuse, and sometimes it can show a clear picture. We try to include both and pull from what we can.
What do you think, like, I know you don't live here, but I was also struck by I don't know if there's a number here, but it says the high percentage of individuals, especially youth, living below the poverty level. Larger families, or the just sheer number of families living below the poverty level with kids?
Yeah, often it's not unique to Pine Bluffs. Most of the time, we'll see the poverty level of families can more easily fall below that poverty level just because they have kids to take care of, more people in their family that rely on maybe a single income or no income. And so there is often that risk of seeing more children under that poverty level just because of the situation that they're in, instead of single individuals without a family. So it's just how poverty is calculated, and then who is most at risk of falling under that line because of the dependence on the household income.
Yeah, I was just shocked. It says that children comprise nearly half of our number. but
I would also say that this data especially is, whenever you're looking at income levels, they use a baseline for an area median income, which likely is taking into consideration, if not Cheyenne in its entirety, its suburbs. And they have a higher median income the closer you get to Cheyenne. So that just puts us in Pine Bluffs at a disadvantage statistically. So it's not necessarily that it's a high poverty rate because it's compared with a larger area as well.
I'm gonna jump back to the land use map real fast.
Great.
On the downtown listed area on the map, is that due for, like, I guess, I don't know how to word that correctly. Is that something you want to encourage us to do, like zone that downtown specifically? And is that something that's common?
It is. It is something that's common. It's often used for communities that want to treat their downtown as not just another commercial center, but that there is maybe something more special about it, that the uses are different than maybe just right off the highway. The form is different, and so you might have different types of uses that can use the space. And so it is very common to have a particular downtown future land use category. But you bring up a good comment about the difference between a future land use plan and zoning. Because ultimately, one of the implementation measures of this is to update the zoning code to kind of align with how we want to grow as a community. But it is separate, right? So this is an ideal, and Pine Bluffs can then decide whether they want to do a complete overhaul of the zoning and kind of just update it from start to finish. And then you have an opportunity to try to integrate different zoning categories, different districts, change the boundaries of those based on the guidance of this document. Or a community can say, as zoning or rezone petitions come in, we'll use this document to help us understand whether we approve or deny that, whether that's the vision of the community. So it could be kind of a piecemeal over time. This will be a guide for how those zoning decisions change, or if the community decided to relook at their zoning code holistically, it's an opportunity to integrate and implement this direction more holistically throughout the zoning code.
one of the other things I think came up in here, and it's something we talked about at last meeting, and we've talked about various times, but I know in previous meetings of the committee, we talked about whether we really need bike paths or any of that, but if you just drive around for 5 minutes and see the inconsistency and lack of ADA corners on our sidewalks and any real, like, plan about how to make that consistent in our town. We have stuff all over the place, and there was never, you know, it doesn't appear that there was ever a priority for ADA in the residential areas in any way. So I like that in here a lot. Oh, me. Think I had anything else written.
Really, how much?
So for the future land use map and the categories, were there any other questions about the intent of those categories, or how we've kind of broken up the city? I mean, does it reflect how you envision Pine Bluffs developing in the future?
Wasn't there, yeah. So, just to be clear, I think I read it. Residential transition is not residential, right?
Right.
It's light industry, or light business as it progresses towards, or,
Well, it's a unique category that we're kind of using for areas, let's see if I can get to it. So we've categorized, or we've described it as residential transition areas provide a buffer between residential and commercial areas, and that they're areas that could support a variety of housing options that are close to commercial, civic, and employment uses. And they could have some non-residential components. So we say secondary uses could include restaurants. It's kind of the overflow of commercial areas, but that are maybe closer to where the residents are. I would say, though, that the area includes on the map both blocks to the west, kind of off of the, the major, I apologize, I do not have.
Parsons Street.
Yes, thank you. So kind of being a buffer behind that more, I don't want to say strip commercial, but gateway commercial coming in off the highway and into downtown. But it also includes some areas to the east that are kind of on the other side of some of the more stable neighborhoods that we have. So there's an opportunity for some of those more undeveloped areas to the east to be something different, potentially.
Here.
Yes, sure, by all means.
So, do you have an estimate of how much, if the zoning were to be revised, I guess, to conform to this future land use map? Do you have any estimate of the number of lots or area that would have to be grandfathered?
Well, I would hesitate to give you an answer, like a specific answer on that, because through a zoning code update, there's a whole community and public engagement process to decide how to rezone a community, right? So, what we could do, if you're curious, we could kind of compare what the existing zoning looks like and how we might, using the existing zoning code districts or zoning districts, how they might be applied to these land uses. But if, there's such a sliding scale of whether we create new districts, whether we use existing districts. So I'm not sure I could really give you an answer.
Yeah, I guess I'd be interested in that, because if this template here represents kind of a golden chalice, if you will, the time required and the likelihood of attaining that goal is directly related to what exists here now. So we can approve, these guys, I don't get to vote, thankfully, but they can work with this framework till the cows come home. But, if you have co-op sitting there, which is kind of industrial, and we're looking at that, I guess it's industrial and ag, so wouldn't be too bad, but, there's liable to be some pretty serious misfits that have long-standing presence. And I think you've accommodated, certain things like the parks and stuff pretty well. But I also think that some attention needs to be paid to not just to where we want to be, but how hard it's going to be to get there and how long it's going to take.
So,
I don't know if I'm making sense here.
well, and go ahead and answer that,
You can start.
My thought is, and maybe this is wrong, I completely agree that that's an overwhelming process. But what if, like my question to you would be, and I know this is, if this was the roadmap, and I can't tell you what streets those are, but if you're talking about this transitional stuff that's over here, that shows transitional on the northwest corner, so whatever, that 4th Street going across probably. So what if somebody came and they said, I have this great idea, I have this old house over there, and I'd like to open a restaurant in it. Which is not, you can find examples of that across Cheyenne or any major city for that matter, really. And so if we were using this as our roadmap, so to speak, would we have a willingness, or could we even get the public support to rezone that for them to make that possible? I don't know. I'm asking. I'm thinking of, like, it's kind of surrounded, but if you think about the area surrounding the hospital in Cheyenne, that was all formerly housing, but now it's law offices and Bellafuco, and there's numerous insurance companies, whatever, that are operating out of those old houses. I don't know that I mean, that's a long way into the future, but I'm wondering if that's more how to use this document than just wholesale rezone.
Well, and I would hesitate to, and I guess I maybe push back a little bit on the assumption that we're changing a lot. Because if you look at the zoning map on page 14, I know it's small, but some of those areas that we've identified as residential transition are already zoned commercial, or some form of commercial. And a lot of the core areas around town here, we're not saying that they should be anything but low-density or medium-density residential. You know, and so we're not trying to threaten, you know, the stable residential areas of this community. I think where you're gonna see the biggest change, particularly for zoning, are the areas to the north of the tracks, because currently they're not zoned. There is no zoning for those areas. And so this would be a helpful tool to understand what that zoning, future zoning could be. And then I do think, you know, downtown, being able to have a specific downtown zoning district enables a lot of economic development strategies. So there's some benefits of naming things differently or categorizing things a little bit differently to add some nuance to your zoning code and zoning districts. But I don't think the intent of this, and certainly didn't come out of the public process, was to change what we already have.
Yeah, I don't know, but I do agree with Alex to go through and start, and, you know, and you back that up, that's not the intent, is to.
No, and, you know, I've had the dubious pleasure of going through some of this with the city of Cheyenne. And what you end up doing is, in order to kind of compromise, you end up defining things very broadly. You know, and normally when you look at a zoning ordinance, you know, you have R1, R2, R3, you know, MR, this kind of thing. And each one incorporates the one above it. So you can get all the way down to industrial, and if you really want to do it, you can put a house in there. I mean, it's not that rigid. But, you know, I guess I'm just throwing that out as a thought and maybe a challenge to try to, you know, think through the implementation of this as we study and look at what the goal is. And, you know, on the page 32, for example, yeah, there we go. I think the baseball field is in the rodeo grounds is mixed-use commercial.
Yes.
Right.
Well, that's gonna take some heavy-duty defining skills to be able to say that isn't a grandfather job.
Right. I also think that some of this is based on the public's input that
Sure it is.
in a perfect world, we would like to pick up those two venues and throw them north of the track somewhere, which would create a different zone. I assume how,
Yes.
instead of being public space, that became on your
Right.
map, that became that.
Well, as the community has the opportunity to expand, and even maybe have updated baseball fields and space for these recreational activities, the closer in you are to the core areas of the community, the more valuable they are for land uses. And so, you really want to make sure that you can have the highest and best use, especially with that access to downtown and where most of the residents are. Of course, recreation and parks are also a valued asset to the community, so we want to make sure that we have space for those, and we're not, trading one for the other.
But you're right, as it sits now, that would be problematic.
You'd have Lowell and Linda in here in a heartbeat. If suddenly that became,
I don't know, it might be a trade-off for them. Well, I think it's like, I don't know. You're not supposed to create a document just to ignore it, but I think it's in a perfect world, this is what, this is what we would, I don't see a problem with kind of the idea, but practicality of some of that in little bits is maybe more difficult to implement, but.
Well, you're right that we want it to be a plan that's not just going to sit on a shelf, right? If there are major red flags with the content that we've presented in the goals and policies or in the future land use map, we need to make sure that we're addressing those issues before it becomes before it becomes an adopted document, because if it's not a document that this group can stand behind, if this council can say, this is the vision for the community, this is how we can, move development forward as a roadmap, then you're not going to want to use it, the community's not going to want to use it, right? So if there are those major issues that you see that either are through, implementation or just overall direction, this is a perfect time to make sure we're aware of them and find a resolution, find a middle ground, find a different tool. If that area, if that site, if it's going to be a hurdle that doesn't get anywhere, right? Maybe we need to redefine what that looks like and have a different set of tools to help that area develop or be an asset to the community in another way.
one other topic here. You got a really good steering committee here. I'm sure they're getting paid a lot to do this too. But I'm assuming, Chapter 5, Title 15, Chapter 5 is all about the Planning Commission. And really, all the authority that we're talking about is vested in the Planning Commission. So are we looking at establishing a Planning Commission in addition? Okay.
Well, so I'm really glad you brought that up, because on page 2, we do have a policy about considering creating a planning commission. On page 25, goal 3, option A, consider establishing a planning commission to implement this
There you
community
go.
master plan. So you're right on the money that the power would, there's certainly a benefit to having an authority to help move this along. Of course, you guys seem very in tune with planning in general, and I don't know if you would want to give up that authority.
Well,
Of course, I mean,
specified.
under the statutes, they have the right to trump the planning commission. It wouldn't be the first time that's happened. But if you ignore them all the time, they quit.
Just gotta appoint another one.
Right. I'm not getting involved in that thing, they just ignore it. All right, good, thanks. I haven't read this.
So you envision that as a planning commission, for example? Like what all, like in a traditional sense, what all would they deal with?
Well, just about everything in terms of land use goes to the planning commission for review first. And then they bring a recommendation to the governing body and governing body. So, kind of a nifty way to lighten the load, I guess, and spread the decision-making a little bit. And we have competent people in the town, I think, that, have a sense of what works. So, I think there's a batch of them on one in Cheyenne, I think there's 9. But they do pretty well if they get like 6 to show up.
But they really dig into.
They really
individual
do. I
things.
mean, you had usually some contractors, developers, construction guys, usually a couple of lawyers to screw things up. But I think the planning commission is, I think it's an effective tool, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
All right. What else do we have?
So the last few slide decks I had were about the implementation measures. And so the last chapter we have breaks down some of the kind of maybe the priority action items into buckets of regulation standards, new studies, plans, and programs, and then capital improvements. There are also implementation measures integrated into the policy statements. So it's not one or another. I think both chapters need to be looked at in tandem. But the intent of this one was of this final implementation chapter, in terms of writing out the strategies, the kind of priority strategies, and certainly those are just the priority strategies that we through our lens. And so if there are different strategies or different priorities from this council or from the public, once we bring this back out to the public, we can update that list kind of to help, understand what do we need to tackle first. And then I also wanted to mention that we have, as part of the process, we have built in some room for doing a cost and logistics analysis for certain capital improvement projects that are ideally that would have been identified through this process. So we can either talk about what those are, like what capital projects would benefit from that additional kind of breakdown of what it would take to do that project. Certainly, we have a limitation of how many projects we can do a cost analysis for, but if there were any projects on your mind that we would want to integrate or use this process through to understand, the budget, logistics, what it would take to get it down the, actually into implementation, we can do that at the end of this process.
Okay.
So I promised Kim and Jackie I'd only take 30 minutes of your time, and I've taken more than that. But so next steps, we are going to have another steering committee later this month. tentatively for July 26th. So if any council members had additional thoughts as they have more time to peruse the document, we would love to discuss any additional red flags or concerns with that group later this month. So please get your comments in if you have any. In terms of the schedule, I did mention that we would like to go back to the public for a community event in August to present the work that we've done with the steering committee, the public engagement so far with this draft, and get their review on that. And then tentatively, September, October, we could start looking at formally adopting what that revised document looks like. Any questions before I leave you to your other agenda items?
I don't have any. Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any other visitor comments? Slow. On to department reports, Jana.
A few updates from the senior center. They've approved their budget at their last meeting for FY23. They're working on revising personnel policies. The garage sale made $767. All staff have completed their CPR training, and just a shout out, they said, to Tony Perry for making the process easier for them this year. They also had a board member resign, so if anyone is interested in filling the vacancy, please head down to the senior center for information. And that's it.
Great. Bubba?
I don't have anything, thank you.
Good. Ally?
Nothing new for me.
Tom?
Nothing, boss.
Great. Alex?
Good.
Kim? Well,
I
ahead.
have nothing to report.
all right. Thank you for joining us. You, Chance, I forgot Chance is in the back of the room. I don't know how I forgot
Okay.
you. You shined a flashlight in my face.
Sorry about that. I don't know how that happens. Just a couple things. We're still doing our DARE summer program. It's Fridays at 5 o'clock, 5 to 6. It's a great program, and afterwards we plan on doing some kind of field trip with whatever parents and students agree on, so that should be fun. We're also doing, I kind of revised, there's a federal program, you've probably seen it, called Lock It or Lose It, or Lock It, Hide It, or Lose It, and we don't like the wording of that. It sounds terrible. It kind of insinuates that if you have something stolen, we're not going to do anything about it. So we've changed ours to be Lock It and Protect It. And so the idea is just, there's a list on Facebook, and it should be coming out in the paper of just the things to do to protect your property, and basically just personalizing it. If you have tools or any kind of equipment, serial numbers, things like that, photograph it, put those on your phone, I think, and then share those with your cloud, because then you can always access that from another place and share that with us easily, so we can help you recover your stuff. So if we have that information, it makes it a lot easier. I think we had a case just a couple weeks ago, people saw on Facebook where somebody was messing with the handle of something, and thankfully it was just a big misunderstanding, but just quickly were able to collect DNA and fingerprints and find out who that was, and that's what we plan on doing. So, and just in a matter of hours. So that's kind of just the direction we're going. If we have any cases of suspected property theft, just trying to get on top of it as fast as possible. So other than that, that is all. So unless anybody has any questions or needs anything else.
Questions?
So yeah, thank you.
Chance.
Thank you.
Announce this. Any other announcements? So, I don't really know what we did here. Do we have a second meeting scheduled for July that we
Yeah,
moved?
I think the 27th.
And we got the quarterly meeting on the 20th.
Correct.
Wednesday.
Yeah.
Wednesday, the 20th is our county elected officials meeting. Our next scheduled meeting is our COW meeting on Wednesday, July 27th at 4:30.
I won't, be there anyhow, but after this meeting, if we could have the meetings a little later in the day. I know you
Okay.
don't like that, Tom, but
I know. Let's do it early in the morning then.
I still don't make.
5
it
o'clock in the
tomorrow.
morning.
Well, that
Jeez,
Yeah,
Tom.
that'll do it.
would work.
Yeah.
So-
Fun, but
Does
would
everyone
work.
agree on this one being then, and we'll try to discuss what our.
Yeah.
But we need your guidelines by that meeting, like, so we don't continue to schedule.
Okay, I'll send you kind of when I'm,
Okay,
yeah. I think my last class is done at 4:45, so 5:30. Any day I should be available.
we could get a police escort back to Pine Bluffs.
There you go, extra fast.
All right,
Great.
with that,
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
moved and seconded, we adjourn, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone, thanks, Kim.
Thanks, guys.
Chance, you got the keys to